The ship screamed through the atmosphere like a dying star. Metal tore against metal as the hull buckled under forces it was never meant to endure. Inside the cockpit, Captain Hyunji fought with controls that no longer responded to her commands. Red warning lights painted her face in crimson flashes, while alarms blared their useless warnings. She had been on a routine survey mission when the asteroid field appeared on her sensors. Too late, too fast. The fragments had torn through her shields like paper, shredding the small scout vessel's engines and navigation systems. Now gravity pulled her down toward the green and brown planet below, and there was nothing she could do but hold on. The trees came up fast. Hyunji braced herself as the ship clipped the first massive trunk, then the second, spinning wildly as branches tore away pieces of hull. The impact harness dug into her shoulders. Her helmet display flickered and died. Then came the final crash, a tremendous force that slammed her against the restraints and sent everything into darkness. When consciousness returned, pain came with it. Hyunji blinked blood from her eyes and assessed her situation with the cold efficiency of her military training. 3 ribs broken, maybe 4. Left arm fractured. Cuts everywhere. The cockpit had crumpled around her, but the harness had held. She was alive. The emergency release hissed as she triggered it. The harness fell away and Hyunji pulled herself through the shattered canopy. Fresh air hit her face, carrying scents of soil and vegetation and something else, something animal and wild. She collapsed onto moss-covered ground and forced herself to breathe through the pain. Her helmet was gone. The crash must have torn it loose. That was bad, very bad. The helmet contained her emergency beacon, her communication systems, her medical scanners. Without it, she was just another wounded animal in an alien forest. Hyunji dragged herself behind a fallen log and allowed herself 5 minutes to assess the damage. The ship was done. Smoke rose from the torn engines. The survival kit had been thrown clear during the crash and she could see it 30 meters away. But those 30 meters might as well have been 30 kilometers with her injuries. She would need to rest first to splint her arm and bind her ribs. She did not know that she was being watched. In the branches above, 3 pairs of eyes tracked her every movement. They belonged to Tae-young, Ji-woo, and Yuna, young hunters of the Vroon clan. They had been practicing their tracking skills when the metal star fell from the sky, carving a path of destruction through their forest. Tae-young was the largest of the 3, his fur marked with the bold stripes of his bloodline. He crouched on the branch with muscles tensed, every instinct screaming at him to attack the strange creature below. It looked weak, injured, easy prey. Ji-woo placed a restraining paw on his shoulder. She was smaller, her markings more subtle, but her mind was sharper than any blade. She studied the creature carefully, noting its strange, smooth skin and the way it moved with purpose despite obvious pain. This was not mindless prey. This was something that thought and planned. Yuna was the youngest, barely old enough to join hunting practice, but her eyes were keener than both her companions. She spotted something in the scorched earth near the crash site, something that gleamed in the filtered sunlight. With a gesture, she drew the others' attention to it. They descended from the trees with the fluid grace of born predators. Tae-young approached the crash site first, claws extended, ready for danger. But the smoking wreckage was empty except for twisted metal and broken glass. Ji-woo circled wide, ensuring no threats lurked nearby. Yuna went straight for the gleaming object. It was like nothing they had ever seen. Smooth and curved, it fit roughly the shape of a head. Strange symbols glowed faintly on its surface, pulsing with inner light. When Yuna reached out to touch it, the symbols changed, shifting into new patterns. She pulled her paw back with a startled hiss. Tae-young pushed past her and grabbed the object. The moment his claws made contact, the helmet came alive. Lights danced across its surface. Strange sounds emerged from it, soft chirps and beeps that meant nothing to Vroon ears. Then something extraordinary happened. The front of the helmet became transparent, and through it, Tae-young could see the world painted in new colors. He could see heat. The warm signature of his companions glowed orange and red against the cooler forest background. He could see the path of the crash marked in yellow where fires still smoldered. He could see small creatures in the underbrush, their body heat betraying their hiding places. And he could see the injured creature behind the log, its form outlined in bright colors that pulsed with each heartbeat. By the ancestors, Tae-young whispered in the language of the Vroon. It sees everything. Ji-woo took the helmet next, turning it over in her paws with careful deliberation. She studied the symbols, the way they changed and flowed. There was intelligence here, she realized. This object was thinking, responding, learning. When she placed it over her head, the world transformed into a web of information. Lines and numbers appeared, marking distances and angles. She could see the trajectory the metal star had taken as it fell. She could see structural weaknesses in nearby trees. The helmet was trying to teach her things, trying to show her patterns in the chaos. Yuna barely waited her turn before snatching the helmet away. She was smallest, but she had the fierce spirit. When she wore the helmet, something different happened. Sounds emerged from it, sounds that almost seemed like words. The helmet was listening to them speak, she realized. It was learning their language. The three young hunters looked at each other with wide eyes. This was treasure beyond measure. This was power. With this object, they could become the greatest hunters the clan had ever seen. They could prove themselves worthy of adult names and warrior status. They could finally earn respect from the elders who still called them cubs and whelps. "We should bring it to Elder Myung-hee," Ji-woo said, though her paws clutched the helmet possessively. "And let the adults claim the glory," Tae-young challenged. "We found it. It should be ours. But the elders will know what it is," Ji-woo argued. "They have wisdom we lack." Yuna settled the debate with youthful certainty. "We keep it secret. We learn its powers. Tonight is our turn for guard duty. We can test it then. If it truly makes us better hunters, the elders will see our worth without knowing the source." It was a dangerous plan. Keeping secrets from the elders violated their teachings about clan unity. But the temptation was too strong. They were tired of being dismissed as children. They wanted to be warriors. The three young hunters gathered their prize and melted into the forest, heading back toward the clan territory. Behind them, the ship continued to smoke, and behind the fallen log, Hyunji watched them disappear with her helmet, her only hope of rescue vanishing into the alien wilderness. She lay back against the moss and closed her eyes. The pain was getting worse. She needed medical attention soon. But first she needed to understand these creatures. Were they sapient? They had examined the helmet with curiosity rather than fear. They had communicated with each other using what seemed like language. They had made a collective decision and left together with purpose. Not animals then, not simple beasts. Something more. Hyunji forced herself to her feet. The survival kit beckoned. Inside would be medical supplies, food, basic tools. Enough to keep her alive for a few weeks if she was careful. And in those weeks she would watch these creatures. She would learn their patterns. She would find a way to get her helmet back, because Captain Hyunji had not survived 3 tours of deep space exploration by giving up when things got difficult. She had survived by being smarter, tougher, and more determined than any challenge the universe threw at her. This alien world would be no different. She took her first painful step toward the survival kit, and toward whatever future awaited her in this strange new place. 3 days had passed since the crash. Hyunji had transformed a small cave into a makeshift shelter, hidden beneath an overhang of rock and concealed by thick vegetation. The survival kit had provided enough supplies to stabilize her injuries. The medical foam had sealed her cuts and supported her broken ribs. Her arm was splinted with materials salvaged from the wreckage. She could move now, though every step reminded her of the crash. But movement was necessary. She had spent those 3 days observing the creatures who had taken her helmet. They were feline in appearance, walking upright on digitigrade legs. Their fur came in patterns of stripes and spots, and they stood roughly her height. They carried crude weapons, spears and knives made from stone and bone. But there was nothing crude about the way they used them. Hyunji had named them in her mind. The large, bold one was Stripes. The thoughtful, smaller one was Spots. The young, fierce one was Kit. She watched them from hiding, tracking their movements through the forest. They were practicing hunting techniques, learning to move silently through underbrush to read tracks in the soil, to coordinate attacks on prey, and they were using her helmet. Each evening, as the twin suns set and darkness crept through the forest, the 3 young hunters took up positions around a cluster of dwelling structures. Guard duty, Hyunji realized. They were protecting their community from nocturnal predators, and they took turns wearing her helmet while they did it. The change in their performance was remarkable. With the helmet's night vision and thermal imaging, they spotted threats long before the other guards noticed anything. They coordinated their responses with unprecedented efficiency. Hyunji watched as they drove off a pack of wolf-like predators that had tried to approach the dwellings. The attack that should have required a dozen warriors was handled by 3 cubs wearing her technology. The helmet was learning their language too. Hyunji could see the translation protocols activating, processing their speech patterns. Soon it would be able to translate their words. That gave her an idea, dangerous but necessary. On the fourth night, she made her move. Tae-young wore the helmet during the first watch. He paced the perimeter of the settlement, eyes scanning the darkness through the magical device that showed him heat and movement. His chest swelled with pride. For 3 nights now, he and his companions had performed flawlessly. The adult warriors had noticed. Whispers of approval had reached his ears. Soon they would be recognized as true hunters. A flicker of movement caught his attention. The helmet's display highlighted a heat signature approaching from the forest. Too large for normal prey, too deliberate in its movements. Tae-young's fur bristled as he gripped his spear. The creature emerged into the moonlight and Tae-young's breath caught. It was the being from the crash. The one whose star metal den they had scavenged. It stood on 2 legs like a vroon, but its skin was bare and strange. It raised its forelimbs slowly, palms forward in a gesture Tae-young did not understand. His instinct was to attack, to call for the other guards, to earn glory by bringing down this strange prey, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the way the creature moved, careful and purposeful. Perhaps it was the intelligence in its eyes. Or perhaps it was the helmet itself, now displaying symbols and sounds that seemed agitated as if trying to communicate urgency. The creature pointed at the helmet, then at itself, then at the helmet again. The meaning was clear. It wanted its possession returned. Tae-young bared his fangs in what his people considered a threat display. The helmet was his now, finder's claim by the old laws. He had discovered it fairly and would not surrender it to anyone, not even its creator. But the creature did something unexpected. It sat down. Right there in the open, it lowered itself to the ground and simply sat, making itself vulnerable. Then it began to make sounds, soft and rhythmic, that the helmet suddenly translated into words overlaid on Tae-young's vision. Not take. Share. Danger coming. Big danger. Tae-young's ears flattened against his skull. The helmet could speak their language now. How was this possible? And what danger? Before he could process this, Jiwoo and Yuna arrived, alerted by his posture of alarm. They saw the creature and immediately flanked Tae-young, weapons ready. But Yuna's eyes widened when she saw the translated words still hovering in the air before them. "It speaks," she whispered. "The helmet learned our tongue." Jiwoo approached cautiously, her analytical mind working through the implications. If the helmet could learn their language, what else could it teach them? And why had this creature come to them instead of fleeing? Hyunji watched the 3 young hunters debate among themselves. She could not understand their words yet, but body language was universal enough. The large one was aggressive and possessive. The smaller, thoughtful one was curious and cautious. The young one was excited and fearful in equal measure. She needed to make them understand. Drawing in the dirt with a stick, she sketched quickly. A large shape with claws and armor. She had seen the tracks of such a creature near her crash site. Massive prints that suggested something far more dangerous than the wolf packs these cubs had been fighting. The moment she began drawing, all 3 hunters went still. Jiwoo crept closer, staring at the crude illustration. Her fur stood on end. "Grask," she breathed. "She draws a grask." Tae-young's bravado evaporated. Everyone knew about grask. They were the monsters of legend, territorial beasts that killed for sport as much as food. A grask had not been seen in their lands for 3 generations, but the stories persisted. Stories of entire hunting parties slaughtered. Stories of dens crushed and cubs devoured. Yunji pointed at her drawing, then at the forest, then at the settlement behind them. She made a walking motion with her fingers, indicating movement toward them. Then she held up fingers. 3 days, maybe 4, before the creature reached this place. She could see in their eyes that they understood. Something terrible was coming, and she was offering to help them face it. Jiwoo was the first to lower her weapon. "How can you help?" she asked, forgetting for a moment that the creature might not understand. But the helmet translated, and Hyunji heard the words in her own language through the device's audio. She smiled, a gesture that showed teeth and apparently alarmed Tae-young until she covered her mouth. Different cultures, different meanings for expressions. She pointed at herself, then made coordinated gestures with both hands, moving them in patterns that suggested working together. Then she pointed at them, at the helmet, at the settlement. Together, the gesture said, "We work together." Yuna stepped forward before either of her companions could stop her. The youngest hunter approached the strange creature and examined it closely. She saw the medical foam on its skin, the way it favored one arm. This being was injured in pain, yet it had come to warn them instead of fleeing or hiding. That took courage. That took honor. I want to trust it, Yuna said to her companions. It came to help. It came for the helmet, Tae-young argued, though his conviction was weakening. If it only wanted the helmet, it could have tried to steal it while we slept, Ji-woo countered. It is stronger than it looks. I have watched how it moves. This one knows combat. It could have taken the helmet by force from any of us alone. The three young hunters looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. They were cubs, yes, but they were also responsible for guard duty. If a Grask was truly coming, they needed every advantage. And this strange creature was offering knowledge, offering help. The decision was Tae-young's to make. He was the senior of their group, if only by a few moons. He stared at the creature for a long moment, then slowly removed the helmet and held it out. Hyunji took it carefully, respectfully. She placed it on her head and immediately began accessing its systems. The helmet had indeed learned their language, creating a functional translation database. She adjusted the settings, then handed it back to Tae-young. Put on, she said, and the helmet translated her words. I teach. You learn. We hunt together. The word hunt resonated with all three young Vroon. That was their language, their purpose, their identity. This creature understood that. It spoke to them not as prey or as children, but as fellow hunters. Tae-young took the helmet and placed it back on his head. Immediately, new symbols appeared in his vision. Diagrams showing formations, patterns of movement, concepts he had never considered. The helmet was now teaching him deliberately, guided by its creator. What is your name? Ji-woo asked, realizing they could now communicate properly. Hyunji smiled, carefully keeping her teeth covered this time. Hyunji. I'm called Hyunji. I am Ji-woo. This is Tae-young and Yuna. They spent the rest of that night in careful communication. Hyunji explained what she knew of the Grask from her sensor readings and tracking. It was massive, territorial, and migrating directly toward the settlement. The young hunters explained their people's history with such beasts and their current vulnerability. Many adult warriors were away on seasonal hunts, leaving the settlement defended by the old, the young, and a handful of guards. As dawn approached, they had the beginning of a plan. It was dangerous and would require trust on both sides, but it was better than facing the Grask unprepared. One thing you must know, Ji-woo said as they prepared to part. There is a warrior named Dong-hyun who watches us closely. He suspects we have gained our new skills dishonestly. If he finds you, he may try to kill you first and ask questions never. Hyunji nodded, understanding. There were always those who feared the unknown. Then we must be careful. And we must be fast. The Grask will not wait for us to be ready. As she melted back into the forest, the three young hunters looked at each other with a mixture of fear and excitement. They had just allied with a creature from the stars to fight a monster from their nightmares. Their lives would never be simple again. The morning sun filtered through the canopy as Hyunji worked quickly in her hidden camp. She had salvaged what she could from the crash site, and now she laid out the pieces like a puzzle. Broken conduit that could be shaped into spear points, power cells that still held charges, sections of hull plating that could serve as shields. Everything had a use if you were desperate enough and creative enough. She heard them before she saw them. 3 sets of footsteps moving through the forest with increasing confidence. The young hunters had returned and they had brought questions. Tae-young emerged first, the helmet secured to his belt. We told the other guards we were practicing extended patrol techniques. That will give us a few hours before we are missed. Good, Hyunji said, gesturing them closer. Then we have no time to waste. How many warriors remain in your settlement? Ji-woo's tail lashed with anxiety. 8 full warriors, including Dong-hyun, plus 12 guards like us who are trained but not yet blooded, and the elders who can still fight if pressed. The numbers were worse than Hyunji had hoped. Against a creature like the Grask, they would need coordination and strategy, not just courage. She spread out a crude map she had drawn in the dirt, marking terrain features she had observed. The Grask will come from here. She indicated the north ridge. It follows the game trails. We cannot stop it with strength alone. We must use the terrain. We must think like humans think. How do humans think? Yuna asked, her young eyes bright with curiosity. Hyunji smiled. We are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. We do not have claws or thick fur or natural armor. So we became the smartest. We learned to make the world fight for us, to turn every advantage into a weapon. She began to draw in the dirt, showing them concepts that had no names in their language. Flanking maneuvers. Tactical retreats, using terrain for cover and concealment. The helmet translated her words, but some ideas were so foreign they required demonstration. You retreat on purpose? Tae-young asked, his voice colored with disbelief. That is cowardice. That is strategy, Hyunji corrected gently. A dead warrior cannot protect anyone. A live warrior who falls back can fight again from better ground. There is no honor in dying stupidly when you could win by thinking. The concept clearly troubled him, running against everything his culture taught. But Jiwoo leaned forward, her analytical mind grasping the possibilities. Show us more, she demanded. They spent hours running through scenarios. Hyunji taught them hand signals for silent communication. She showed them how to judge distance and timing. She explained the concept of a coordinated assault, where every hunter had a specific role and trusted the others to fulfill theirs. Yuna proved to be a quick student, her youth making her more adaptable. Tae-young struggled with concepts that required patience over aggression, but his strength and courage were undeniable, and Jiwoo absorbed everything like dry earth soaking up rain, already thinking 3 moves ahead. The sun was high when Dong-hyun found them. He materialized from the forest with the silence of a true predator, his scarred face twisted in fury. So this is the source of your newfound skills. A demon from the sky. The 3 young hunters jumped to their feet, but Hyunji remained seated, keeping her posture non-threatening. She had expected this confrontation. Dong-hyun was older, larger, a warrior in his prime with the scars to prove it. Fighting him would be foolish. I am not a demon, she said calmly, letting the helmet translate. I am a traveler whose ship fell from the stars. I mean your people no harm. Dong-hyun's lips pulled back from his fangs. You corrupt our young with strange ideas. You teach them to run from battle. This is poison. I teach them to survive, Hyunji replied. There is a Grask coming. 3 days, maybe less. Without help, many of your people will die. Then we will die as warriors, not as cowards who flee and scheme. Dong-hyun's claws extended as he took a step forward. You will leave this place, Sky Demon, or I will make you leave. Tae-young moved to intercept, placing himself between Dong-hyun and Hyunji. She is under our protection. We claimed her as Pak-kin by right of discovery. The word seemed to surprise Dong-hyun. Pak-kin was an old designation, rarely invoked. It meant the 3 cubs were willing to fight to defend her, to share in her honor or her shame. It was a binding claim that even a senior warrior could not easily dismiss. You would invoke the old laws for this creature? Dong-hyun's voice was dangerous and low. We would, Jiwoo said firmly, moving to flank Tae-young. Yuna took position on the other side, the 3 of them forming a wall between the warrior and the human. Hyunji stood slowly, keeping her movements careful. There is another way. Let me prove my worth. If I help you kill the Grask, then judge me by that deed. If I fail or flee, then you may do with me as you wish. Dong-hyun considered this. His duty was to protect the clan, not to indulge his prejudices. And if the sky creature truly could help against a Grask, refusing that help would be its own form of cowardice. One chance, he growled. But know this, creature. If you prove false, if you endanger our people, I will not wait for permission to end you. Fair enough, Hyunji agreed. Then let us prepare. The Grask will not delay for our pride. What followed was a frantic day of preparation. Dong-hyun, for all his suspicion, was no fool. He listened as Hyunji explained her assessment of the threat and her proposed strategy. He bristled at her suggestions of coordinated retreat and ambush tactics, but he could not deny the logic. Together they selected the killing ground, a narrow ravine where the Grask would be funneled and unable to use its size advantage. Hyunji showed them how to sharpen the salvaged metal into effective blades. She created crude explosive charges from the ship's power cells, devices that could be triggered remotely if the Grask needed to be hurted or injured. The other warriors came to observe, drawn by curiosity about the sky stranger. Most were wary but willing to listen. The elders remained in the settlement, too old to hunt but still sharp enough to recognize necessity when they saw it. Elder Myung-hee, the clan's leader, came to examine Hyunji herself. The old female moved slowly, but her eyes missed nothing. She studied the human for a long moment before speaking. You smell of pain, Myung-hee observed. Your body is injured, yet you work without rest. Why do you help us when you could simply hide until the danger passes? Hyunji met the elder's gaze steadily. Where I come from, we have a saying. No one survives alone. I am stranded on your world. If your people die, my chances of survival decrease. But more than that, your young came to help me when I was wounded. They could have killed me, but chose curiosity instead. I honor that choice by standing with them now. Myung-hee's whiskers twitched in what might have been approval. Strange words from a strange creature. But there is truth in them. Very well, Skywalker. Show us how your people hunt monsters. That night, Hyunji barely slept. She reviewed every detail of the plan, checking and rechecking her improvised weapons. The power cells were unreliable, possibly unstable. The metal spear points were rough but sharp. The coordinated tactics depended on warriors following complex instructions in the chaos of battle. There were a dozen ways this could fail. Tae-young found her in the darkness, the helmet glowing softly on his head. You are afraid, he observed. It was not a question. Yes, Hyunji admitted. Fear keeps you alert. It reminds you that death is real and final. Anyone who faces a Grask without fear is a fool. But you face it anyway. I face it because there is no other choice. Because running would only delay death, not prevent it. Because sometimes courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Tae-young was quiet for a moment. Then he removed the helmet and held it out to her. Tomorrow you should wear this. You understand its powers better than we do. Hyunji shook her head. Tomorrow you will wear it. You know your people in this land. I will be your eyes from a distance, but you will lead your hunters. They will follow you more readily than they would follow me. I am not a leader. I am barely a warrior. You are a warrior tomorrow, whether you feel ready or not. The Grask will not care about your doubts. So leave your doubts here in this moment and take up your courage for the morning. In the darkness before dawn, the hunting party gathered. 8 full warriors, including Dong-hyun, 12 trained guards, including the 3 young hunters, and 1 human who should not have been able to stand but refused to fall. They moved in silence to the killing ground, taking positions as Hyunji had instructed. Tae-young wore the helmet, feeding information to Jiwoo, who relayed it to the others using hand signals they had practiced. Yuna carried one of the explosive charges, her role to trigger it at the crucial moment. Dong-hyun led the main force, his pride allowing him to admit the sky creature's tactics might work. And Hyunji took position on the ridge above, carrying a makeshift spear and a communicator jury-rigged from ship components. From here she could see the entire battlefield, could coordinate the hunters, could call warnings. The sun rose red through the morning mist. Somewhere in the distance something roared, a sound that shook leaves from trees and sent prey animals fleeing in terror. The Grask was coming. Hyunji gripped her spear and activated the communicator. Positions, everyone. Remember your training. Trust each other. And whatever happens, we face it together. Through the helmet, Tae-young's voice came back, steady despite the fear she knew he felt. Together, he agreed. The Grask emerged from the mist like a nightmare given flesh, 12 feet tall, covered in armored plates with claws that could tear through stone. It moved with terrible purpose, heading directly for the settlement as Hyunji had predicted. The hunt had begun. The Grask was larger than anything Hyunji had fought before. She had faced hostile aliens, rogue machines, and the dangers of deep space. But this creature was pure predatory rage wrapped in armor plating that had evolved over millions of years to make it nearly invincible. It stalked into the ravine exactly as predicted, following the game trail that generations of prey had worn into the earth. The helmet's sensors tracked its heat signature, and Tae-young relayed the information with hand signals. The hunting party held position, hidden in the rocks and underbrush, every warrior fighting their instinct to attack immediately. Hyunji watched from above, her makeshift communicator crackling with static. Wait, she whispered, knowing the helmet would translate for Tae-young. Let it reach the center. Trust the plan, but the Grask suddenly stopped. Its massive head swung back and forth, nostrils flaring. It was smelling something wrong, sensing the ambush despite all their precautions. The creature's intelligence was greater than Hyunji had anticipated. With a roar that shook the ground, the Grask charged not forward but sideways, directly at the position where Dong-hyun and 4 warriors lay hidden. The beast had somehow identified the greatest threat and was moving to eliminate it first. Now, Hyunji shouted. Trigger the first charge. Yuna pressed the detonator. The explosive device that Hyunji had placed along the ravine wall detonated with a sharp crack. Rock and dirt rained down, not on the Grask but behind it, cutting off its retreat. The beast roared in fury, spinning to face this new threat. That moment of distraction was all Dong-hyun needed. He burst from cover with a war cry. His spear aimed at the creature's throat. The other warriors followed, spreading out in the formation Hyunji had taught them, attacking from multiple angles to divide the Grask's attention. But the beast was experienced. It had killed hunting parties before. Its tail lashed out, catching one warrior across the chest and sending him flying. Its claws raked another, drawing deep gouges through flesh and fur. When Dong-hyun's spear struck its throat, the point simply skated off the armor plating without penetrating. "The joints," Hyunji called. "Target the joints where the armor plates meet." Jiwoo translated the instruction into concepts the warriors understood. They adjusted their attacks, going for the gaps between armor, the soft tissue at joints and underbelly. It was working, but too slowly. The Grask's rage only grew with each minor wound, and its counterattacks were devastating. Tae-young watched from his position, the helmet feeding him information about the battle. He could see the heat signatures showing where the Grask was generating the most energy, where it was vulnerable. He could see the patterns in its movements, the way it favored its right side, the slight delay before it turned left. The helmet was teaching him to read the fight like Jiwoo read tracks in the forest. "It is learning our patterns," he spoke into the communicator. "Just as we learn its patterns," Hyunji swore in her own language. He was right. The Grask was adapting to their tactics, anticipating their strikes. 2 more warriors went down, their injuries severe. At this rate, they would all be dead before the creature tired. She made a decision that went against every tactical principle she knew. "I am coming down," she announced. "Dong-hyun, pull back to the secondary position." "I will distract it." "No," Tae-young protested. "You are injured, which makes me perfect bait. A wounded creature draws predators. It will focus on me as easy prey. That gives you the opening for a killing strike." Before anyone could argue further, Hyunji was moving. She half ran, half fell down the ravine slope, her broken ribs screaming protest with each jarring step. She had fashioned a crude spear from ship metal, and she carried it now with both hands. The Grask saw her immediately. Perhaps it recognized her scent from the crash site. Perhaps it simply saw an easier target than the armored warriors. Whatever the reason, the massive creature turned its full attention to the small wounded human who dared approach it. Hyunji did not try to fight. Instead, she ran, not away from the Grask but along the ravine floor, staying just ahead of its snapping jaws and slashing claws. This was a human specialty, endurance running. While the Vroon were sprint hunters who relied on bursts of speed, humans had evolved to chase prey across vast distances, to run for hours without stopping. Even injured, even exhausted, Hyunji could maintain a pace that kept her alive. The Grask followed, roaring its frustration as this small prey creature kept escaping by the narrowest margins. It lunged and missed, lunged again and caught only air. The beast's fury overrode its caution, making it sloppy and predictable. "Now," Hyunji gasped into the communicator, "while it is focused on me." The warriors struck from all sides. Dong-hyun drove his spear into the joint where the Grask's rear leg met its body. Jiwoo, moving with surgical precision, placed her blade between 2 armor plates at the shoulder. Other warriors found their marks, each wound small but cumulative, but it was Tae-young, Yuna, and the young guards who made the difference. They had been watching, learning, seeing patterns through the helmet's enhanced vision. They moved as one unit, 3 coordinated strikes at the same moment, all targeting the Grask's left side where the armor was slightly weaker. The creature stumbled. For the first time, it showed pain rather than rage. It tried to turn to face this new threat, but Hyunji was there, stabbing at its feet, keeping it off balance. "The throat," Jiwoo called. "The armor plates shift when it roars." The Grask, hearing her voice, opened its mouth to roar again, and Dong-hyun, moving with the speed earned through decades of hunting, threw his spear with all his strength directly into that open mouth. The spear punched through the soft tissue of the throat and into the brain cavity beyond. The Grask's roar became a gurgle. Its legs buckled. The massive creature crashed to the ground, sending up clouds of dust and making the earth shake. For a long moment, no one moved. The warriors stood frozen, unable to believe the monster was dead. Then slowly they began to breathe again, to lower their weapons, to check their wounded. Hyunji collapsed against a boulder, her vision swimming. She had pushed her injured body far beyond safe limits. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was fading, leaving only pain and exhaustion. She watched through dimming eyes as the Vroon warriors approached the fallen Grask, touching it cautiously to confirm its death. Tae Young was the first to reach her, the helmet still on his head. "You ran," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "You ran and it could not catch you. How is this possible?" "Humans," Hyunji managed to whisper, "are very good at running. We ran after our prey on the old world until it collapsed from exhaustion. We are not fast, but we do not stop." Jiwoo joined them, her analytical mind already processing what had happened. "You made yourself bait. You used your weakness as a weapon. This is the human way of thinking." "This is one human way," Hyunji corrected. "We have many ways. We adapt, we learn. We use every advantage and turn every disadvantage around." She coughed, tasting blood. "But right now this human needs medical attention." Donghyun approached, his scarred face unreadable. He studied Hyunji for a long moment, then knelt beside her. "You could have stayed on the ridge. You could have watched from safety. But you came down to draw the beast away from my warriors." "They are your warriors," Hyunji said. "But today, for a few moments, we were all one hunting party. No Vroon, no human, just hunters facing a common enemy." The old warrior's expression softened slightly. "You have earned your place, Skywalker. The cubs were right to claim you as packkin, though I will never admit they were right where they can hear me." Yuna laughed at that, the sound high and slightly hysterical with relief. They had survived. They had actually killed a Grask. The stories would speak of this day for generations. But the cost had been high. 2 warriors were dead, their bodies lying still beside the fallen Grask. 5 more were badly injured, including Donghyun, who bled from a deep gash across his ribs, and Yoonji herself was fading fast, her body finally giving up after days of abuse. The warriors made a stretcher from spears and carried her back to the settlement. Elder Myung-hee was waiting, her old eyes taking in the scene with quick assessment. The dead would be honored. The wounded would be healed. And this strange Skywalker who had fought beside them would be given every care they could provide. As they carried Hyunji into the healing den, consciousness slipping away, she heard Myung-hee speak to the gathered clan. "Today we learned that strength comes in forms we did not expect. That knowledge and courage can be as powerful as claws and fangs. That allies can be found in the strangest places." The elder's voice carried authority and warmth. "This Skywalker will be named Pack-Sister. She has earned this honor with blood and sacrifice." Tae Young, still wearing the helmet, knelt beside Hyunji as the healers began their work. "You taught us to think like humans," he said softly. "Now we will teach you to heal like Vroon. Rest, Pack-Sister. You are safe among your clan." The last thing Hyunji saw before darkness took her was the 3 young hunters standing guard over her, the helmet passing between them, their eyes watchful and protective. She had come to this world alone, stranded and hunted, but she would wake among friends. If she woke at all. The healers worked through the night, using techniques passed down through generations. They set bones, treated wounds, and fought against infection and shock. Hyunji's strange anatomy puzzled them, but pain and injury were universal languages. They did their best, and their best was considerable. 3 days later, Hyunji opened her eyes to find the 3 young hunters still there, taking shifts to watch over her. The helmet sat on a carved wooden stand beside her bed, cleaned and maintained with reverence. "You stayed," she whispered. "You are Pack-Sister now," Yuna said simply. "We guard our own." Outside, life continued in the settlement. The Grask's body had been processed, its armor plates and claws distributed among the warriors as trophies and tools. Songs were being composed about the battle. The 2 fallen warriors were honored in ceremony. And in the sky above, a signal beacon pulsed, activated by Hyunji's emergency transmitter. Help was coming, though it would take time to arrive. When it did, difficult questions would need to be answered. Questions about first contact protocols, cultural contamination, and the future relationship between humanity and the Vroon. But those were problems for another day. For now, there was rest and healing, and the strange warmth of belonging to a clan that had not been hers by birth, but had become hers through choice and shared danger. The hunter cubs had found her helmet, and in doing so they had found something far more valuable. They had found the first bridge between 2 species who would, in time, learn to walk it together. 2 weeks after the Grask hunt, Hyunji could finally walk without assistance. Her ribs were healing, the medical foam from her survival kit combining with Vroon healing techniques to speed her recovery. She spent her days in the settlement, observing and learning. while the young hunters continued their guard duties with newfound confidence. The helmet had become something more than a tool. It was a symbol. Each evening as the sun set, Taeyong, Jiwoo, and Yuna took turns wearing it during their watch. But now they wore it openly, with the blessing of Elder Myung-hee. The other young guards wanted to learn from it too, and so the three friends had begun teaching what they had learned. Hyunji watched this with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was proud of how quickly they adapted human tactical concepts to their own hunting traditions. On the other hand, she worried about cultural contamination and the responsibility that came with introducing advanced technology to a developing society. Her concerns became urgent. When the ship arrived, it descended from the sky with a roar that sent the entire settlement into panic. Warriors grabbed weapons and rushed to defensive positions. Cubs were herded into the central den by protective mothers. Even the elders, who had seen many strange things, stared upward with alarm. Only Hyunji remained calm. She recognized the configuration of a Terran rescue vessel. Help had finally arrived. The ship landed in the clearing beyond the settlement, its landing thrusters scorching the grass. A ramp extended and Captain Sang-wook emerged, flanked by 4 armed Marines in full combat armor. His expression was professional but concerned as he scanned the area. "Captain Hyunji," he called out in Korean, "stand clear of the hostiles. We will provide cover for your extraction." Hyunji stepped forward, placing herself deliberately between the Marines and the Vroon warriors. "They are not hostiles, Captain. They are allies. Lower your weapons, please." Sang-wook's eyes widened as he took in her appearance. She wore clothing made from Vroon materials, adapted to fit her human frame. Her hair was tied back with bone clasps. She stood among a group of feline aliens who watched the Terrans with weapons ready but not raised. "Captain, you are not making sense. These are uncontacted aliens. Protocol requires immediate withdrawal and minimal interaction. Protocol did not account for a crash landing, a territorial monster, and 3 brave kids who saved my life." Hyunji replied firmly. "Captain Sang-wook, may I introduce Elder Myung-hee, leader of the Vroon clan? And these are Taeyong, Jiwoo, and Yuna, who I have claimed as pack siblings under their cultural traditions." The 3 young hunters stepped forward. Taeyong wore the helmet, and through it he spoke in translated Korean. "Welcome, Sky people. You come for Hyunji. We understand, but know that she is pack sister. She fought beside us. She bled for us. She is Vroon now as much as she is human." Sang-wook stared at the alien wearing human military technology and speaking his language. His training had not prepared him for this. First contact protocols assumed discovery from orbit, careful observation, eventual diplomatic overtures, not finding one of his officers living among aliens and calling them family. "Captain Hyunji, we need to debrief you privately," he said carefully. "There are serious questions about technology transfer and cultural contamination." "I know," Hyunji agreed, "and I will answer them all. But first you need to understand what has happened here. Will you allow me to show you?" What followed was a tour that challenged everything Sang-wook thought he knew about first contact. Hyunji led him through the settlement, showing him the coordination between young guards who now used hand signals learned from humans alongside traditional Vroon hunting calls. She introduced him to warriors who had adopted tactical thinking without abandoning their cultural values. She brought him to the healing den where injured warriors recovered using both traditional medicine and concepts Hyunji had shared. Jiwoo explained their writing system, which they were now using to record tactical knowledge for future generations. Yuna demonstrated the training exercises that combined human endurance running with Vroon sprint hunting. And Taeyong showed how they had adapted the helmet's technology to teach rather than dominate, using it as a bridge for understanding rather than a weapon. But the moment that truly changed Sang-wook's perspective came when the young guards performed their evening routine. As darkness fell, they took positions around the settlement's perimeter. And there, in the dying light, Taeyong handed the helmet to a younger guard who was just learning his duties. "Wear it with honor," Taeyong said in Vroon, the helmet translating for the human observers. "Remember that it is a tool, not a crutch. Use it to learn, but trust your own senses first. And know that the human who created it gave it freely to protect our people." The young guard put on the helmet with reverence. His eyes widened as the world transformed into enhanced vision, tactical overlays, and teaching protocols. An older warrior stood beside him. guiding him through interpretation of the information, ensuring he understood what he was seeing. It was not cultural contamination. It was cultural evolution. The Vroon were not abandoning their traditions but expanding them, incorporating new knowledge while maintaining their identity. Sang-wook turned to Hyunji. "You have done something unprecedented here." "I survived," Hyunji corrected. "They allowed me to survive. And in return I shared what I knew. Is that not what we are supposed to do? Humanity survived by cooperation, by teaching, by lifting others up alongside us. Earth Command will have strong opinions about this. Let them have opinions. I have responsibilities here. These people saved my life. They accepted me as one of their own. I will not abandon them just because it makes bureaucrats uncomfortable." Elder Myung-hee approached, moving with the careful dignity of age. She addressed Sang-wook directly, though she could not speak his language. The helmet translated her words. "Sky Captain, I am old enough to remember when my grandmother told stories of when the Vroon first learned to shape stone into tools. Each generation improves on what came before. Your Hyunji has given us new tools, but more importantly, she has given us new thoughts. The tools will break with time. The thoughts will last forever."